Right, well, yeah, kia ora koutou, everyone. Welcome to the Farm Strong webinar with Samuel Whitelock, our Farm Strong ambassador. Just waiting for everyone to log in, giving them some time to catch up with us. Hope everyone's had a great day out there, wherever they are. We'll be getting underway before too long. And the first thing what I'm going to do is just to give a little intro about Farm Strong and why it was started and what we do. Let's see, we've got these. Oh, yes, plenty of people joining in. That's good. Okay, so I'll start underway. So Farm Strong began in 2015. It was set up by farmers and growers to help farmers and growers cope with the ups and downs of being in the industry. And many of the ups and downs are beyond people's control. So what can you do to keep yourself, your family, and your teams well? Well, it turns out plenty. The science of well-being says that if we proactively invest in our well-being, then we can really make big difference. Small changes can make really big differences to how we feel about work and life in general. So we'll be sharing some of these tips that farmers and growers have shared with us, and that Sam has gleaned from his own professional sporting life, of course, because as an elite athlete, he's used to operating under stress and pressure too. So yeah, I'm Nigel Beckford. I tell a lot of stories. I spend my life interviewing farmers and growers, and hopefully in the future, with your help, I'll be interviewing you too, some of you too, and sharing your stories, because sharing these stories and connecting with each other, the science of wellbeing shows, is a really good way of actually keeping well and dealing with the stress and pressure, sharing the journey, if you like. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Karen to set the scene a little more, and then we'll catch up with Sam Whitelock, our ambassador.
Thank you very much, Nigel, and welcome everybody, and thank you so much for sort of coming along and attending our first webinar for the winter. We've just come out of conference, so I've seen quite a few of you already, and look, it was pretty clear at conference that we're still feeling a lot of pressure in the industry and a lot of stress in the industry. It's going to take a while for it to turn around, but as I've been telling Samuel and Nigel and the team, beekeepers are a very resilient bunch and pretty optimistic, but times are tough, and looking after yourself and looking after your well-being and using this time before the new season starts to sort of just get match fit, I guess, excuse the pun, is really, really important. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to have Samuel Whitelock here with us today and the team from Farm Strong. We've had a relationship with Farm Strong for a good few years now, and we're keen to see that grow stronger and to sort of connect in more often with these guys. And look, you know, some people have sort of might wonder, well, what does an All Black you know, have in common with a beekeeper? Well, quite a lot actually, just in terms of just having a quick chat with Samuel before. You know, it can be quite an isolating sort of role. There's a lot of pressure. There are times when you're incredibly busy and you've got to stay on top of your game, and it's a physical, you know, I'm not a beekeeper myself, but I know that you guys work really, really hard. So I'm thrilled to sort of get this underway. I won't talk anymore because you're not here to hear me, but can you please make sure you get the questions coming in, because it's a great opportunity to ask those questions as well. So I'll hand over to Nigel again.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that, Karen. It's helpfully set the scene. I'll just remind everyone that it's an interactive session. You can ask any question. We can see the questions appear, but they're all anonymous, so you won't be identified if you ask a question, and we'll do our very best to answer them and cover a lot of territory in the time that's available to us tonight. And of course, it'll be up online later too. If you know someone who could use the session and watching the session, we'll make sure that it's all being recorded at the moment so that you can catch some of the wisdoms later. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Samuel Whitelock, the Farm Strong ambassador, and just ask him a very simple question about, Sam, could you bring us up to speed about your background? What's your connection to farming and agriculture and stuff, and how did you come to be involved in farming and Farm Strong?
Awesome, thanks, Nigel. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking some time out of your busy day. I know everyone is full on at the moment. As rural people or farming people, I don't want to talk about the weather, but we all know it's a little bit wet around the country, and it has its own challenges. But for myself, I grew up on a dairy farm in the Manawatu. So mum and dad are still there. My older brother's running half the farm at the moment. One of four boys. There's only 5 years between all four of us. So a bit of the family joke around, there wasn't a lot to be done on the dairy farm because there's four of us so close in age, but wouldn't have changed it for the world. Had an awesome upbringing. We were a little bit mischievous, we'll say. We used to get into a little bit of trouble here and there, but the cool thing, and one of the big lessons I learned early on, was it was better off to get in trouble with your brothers so they could help you out of it, rather than getting in trouble by yourself. So that kept us really tight as brothers, and we're still very tight and close today, even though we're in our mid to early 30s, and our wives are exactly the same. All our kids are the same too. So my little brother's the last one to bring kids to the equation. We've got three. My two older brothers have got three, but Luke and Claire have got one due in the next couple of days. So got my phone to the side there, hoping for a phone call saying that we've got a new niece or nephew very soon. But for myself, grew up on the dairy farm, had an awesome upbringing, but went to boarding school at Fielding Ag, and had an awesome time because we got to experience what we didn't really have at home. We got to have all these mates around, went to co-ed school, got to experience all these different sports and extracurricular activities. But sport was the thing that we always kept going back to. Mum and Dad were good athletes themselves, but rugby, basketball, athletics, hockey, all these different sports, trampolining, we gave a go. And it was rugby that was the thing that was probably the constant, and the dairy farm at home. So we were encouraged to give everything a crack, but we always kind of seemed to go back to that one thing, being rugby. And that's where my story really kind of took off and takes a U-turn compared to other people, because I never thought I could be a professional rugby player. I never thought I could make a living out of doing something that I really enjoyed. I always thought I'd be a farmer or something similar to what my older cousins were doing. But rugby was the thing that I really enjoyed. And the reason I enjoyed it was because it was challenging. It was something that was different, something that made me challenge myself to get better, grow, and evolve every day. So as that was happening, worked out I wanted to go to university, worked pretty hard, got into Lincoln University, and long story short, ended up meeting my wife. So I was studying a Bachelor of Science, majoring in plant and science, where my wife was doing viticulture. So we bonded over that at the start, and here we are 15, 16 years later with three kids. So we've got a son, Fred, who's 6, our daughter, Iris, who's 4, and our youngest, Penelope, who's almost 2. So the whole time that was going on, rugby really took off, and from the space of 12 months, I went from playing club rugby in New Zealand and Christchurch to starting for the All Blacks. So it happened very, very quick. My journey up the ranks was something that, I dreamt about it, but I never thought it would happen so fast. And along the way, there was a whole lot of challenges, a whole lot of things that I had to get better at, evolve and grow. But while that was happening, Mum and Dad were still on the family farm, and this is where Farm Strong come in, because Mum and Dad were supporting us, playing our rugby, going to university, but all of a sudden, Mum and Dad, who are normally very good communicators, if anything, they over-communicate, always ringing, finding out what's going on. Everything went quiet for about 2 weeks, and no one could work out why. We were ringing home, no answer, and it wasn't until my little brother, who came back from doing his OE overseas in London, he rang us up as brothers and said, "You guys need to get home quick. Mum and Dad are under massive strain and pressure," and we couldn't work out why. Long story short, turns out the cows had contracted salmonella from some of the local wildlife and bird life that's on the Manawatu River where we farm. And Dad and Mum had lost around 200 of the milking herd and 180 of the young stock. And as the story goes, the vet recommended hey, start shooting these cows because they're going to die, they're going to spread it. It's the most humane way for these cows to be passed on. So Dad left home early in the morning, got home about 8 o'clock, and Mum said, "Oh, you finished already?" And Dad said, "No, I'm out of bullets." So Dad had to go get a whole lot more bullets to do what the vet recommended. And it put them under massive strain emotionally, physically, financially. They lost a lot of genetics that were passed on from previous generations, so from granddad's herd to dad and mum's herd, etc. And they've been farming for 30 years at this stage. They had awesome support around them, all their close friends. They had uncles and aunties, grandparents just down the road. So they had everything set up for them to support them through, but they had this massive amount of strain and pressure. So where FarmStrong came in was a year later. I was approached to say, hey, look, this is a new thing that's happening. Are you interested in being a part of it? And I said, yes, I am, definitely, because I'd seen what a weather event, what something can do to people, even though they had all the support in the world. Mum didn't leave the house for about 3 weeks because she didn't want to drive past the pile of dead cows that were on the side of the road that were being taken away. And Dad had never talked about retiring. Every time you spoke to him on the phone, he only ever talked about retiring, and farming should be enjoyable, not the strain that he was going through. So that's how it started. And then there's a whole lot of other things that happened, and pretty proud to say that I've been a part of FarmStrong for a number of years now, and starting to get some awesome feedback from people walking down the street saying, hey, look, what you guys are sharing, the messages that you guys are pushing is making a difference to individuals, whether that's physically, mentally, whether it's with the family, whether it's how people are treating each other, how they're listening. So it's pretty cool to be a part of, and hopefully can pass on some of that knowledge and some of those things that I've experienced so far to date.
No, thanks, Sam. That's an excellent introduction from you to how you come to be involved in FarmStrong. And so let's cut straight to the chase. I think when we initially started FarmStrong, we did this research, and it showed that farmers and growers were great at looking after their stock and their machinery and their pasture and their team, but they completely neglected their own well-being and stuff. So let's start with the most basic of questions. Why is investing in your well-being important, and how do you prioritize it when you're really busy running a business?
Yeah, yourself is very critical, if not the most important thing. And the reason I say this is, for myself as a rugby player, it's the same. When you go up the grades, people become captains, senior players, all those things, and everyone says, hey, look, I need you to look over this. I need you to help out with the lineouts, the scrums, back attack, whatever. But everyone actually forgets about what they've got to do. It's actually go out there and perform yourself. So whether that's in rugby and business and farming, it doesn't actually matter whether you're a beekeeper or not. The first thing you've got to do is nail you. If you nail you, all of a sudden everything else becomes easier and things seem to flow, and it kind of happens naturally. So for myself, I know when I'm playing good rugby, I'm getting the right amount of sleep. I've got good nutrition. I've got all those little things lined up. So it's actually working really well. And I know for myself, I've got to get the balance right. So the balance between family life, wife, kids, time away from people, time within the team, little opportunities to stop and reset throughout the day, or whether that's after a busy time. I know as beekeepers, we're sitting on the cusp of a very busy time. Everyone's pretty much an idle, ready to put the hammer down. So I know everyone on the school's in that spot at the moment too. So, but to answer your question, Nigel, the best thing is looking after yourself. Then all of a sudden you can look after your family, your business, your bees, your hives, etc. So that's how I approach it anyway.
And what about pressure? Every industry comes with its pressures. People want to make a go and be successful at business and stuff. How do you get the balance between, what's healthy pressure and when do you know, and how do you recognize when it becomes unhealthy and it's not helping you make good decisions?
Yeah, everyone's different, and I think you nailed it when you said the right amount of pressure or a healthy amount of pressure. The easiest way I explain this to people, and yet again, these are just things that I've felt. So when I was at university, someone said to me, when do you know there's the right amount of pressure? And we kind of thought about it. Someone said, when I give you an assignment, an essay to do, when do you actually feel the pressure and go, I've got to do something about it? It's all about timing. And you can't have so much pressure on the whole time that your timing's out. But you can get to a stage where you're like, okay, I've got to actually deal with this now. And the best thing that I've felt, whether it's rugby, university, balancing all these other things, whether it's socially, is putting things into an order and go, what is my biggest priority here? And sometimes it's actually putting things on hold, but it's actually writing them down in a calendar. And I know with rugby, sometimes I'm away for 3 to 4 weeks and it's a busy time, but I know when I get back, there's going to be an opportunity to take my kids to the hot pools because they love it, or take them to the movies, or go out for dinner with my wife. Because it's written down in the calendar, it's actually a lot easier to keep that rather than giving it lip service and be like, oh, we'll do this when we're done, because all of a sudden you forget about it, things get busy, and all of a sudden you can't prioritize the important things in your life.
It sounds a little counterproductive, taking time off when you're so busy, but what's the benefit of doing that? And what difference does it make?
For myself and listening to a lot of farmers and having conversations like this, is when they actually have that time off, it actually gives them energy. So when they are back dealing with that list of to-do things that never is ever done and it's never accomplished, it actually allows them to be more efficient with their time. And it's one of the amazing things that I was passed on from some of the great players that I played with. So Brad Thorne, for example, always said, you seem to play better rugby when you have got a good one at home, whether you're going to have kids along the way, because you've actually got to prioritize everything. So what is the most important thing, and how do I do it? And I know that can sound quite easy, but sometimes getting it wrong is the best way to actually get better at it and actually learn, okay, this is not working. I need to, spend some more time, whether it's 5 minutes in the day, to go, okay, what is the first thing I've got to do? And how do I make sure I do that properly? Because if you nail that at the start, then it's actually easier to flow through the day.
That's a great response, and it's that clarity of thinking is obviously important in running anything, isn't it? So we're going to head to some of the questions that people have been sending in. So thanks so much for tuning in today. Here's one. How do you help a tough beekeeper who thinks being vulnerable is a sign of weakness? How do you help people who, under any other circumstances, might be, very, very skilled at their job? It's a very tricky area, sensitive. How do you raise the fact that they might be under stress and may not be admitting it?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I know for myself, I can be quite guarded at times, and it's something that I'm working on. But Kevin Mialamu actually did this better than anyone I've ever met, and he did it from a really helpful way, and he made sure the environment when he was trying to help me was in a safe spot. And when I say a safe spot, I mean it wasn't in front of a whole lot of people that most people are just going to put up a wall and not allow you in. So what Kevy did, it was actually a really simple principle, and he did it really well. So he asked me, hey, Sam, how you getting on? And I gave back the normal, yeah, no, I'm all sweet, I'm all good. But then he actually stopped and said, but how are you really getting on? And that second time he asked exactly the same question was enough to see through my bit of a false answer I'd given, because he'd read my body language, he'd seen how I was acting and behaving, he'd seen that maybe I wasn't right. And as a senior player, he actually nailed it for me. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm a bit grumpy about, I think it was selection, not being picked, or not playing as well as I wanted to be. And just asking that question twice was something that, for me, should have opened me up. And then the best thing was, he didn't actually didn't try to solve the problem. He didn't try to fix it. He just let me speak. He let me have a bit of a vent, and then all of a sudden left it there. So a lot of people, I personally think, find it hard to be open because they're worried everyone will give them the answer. Normally you know the answer, but you just need to get there yourself. And that's how I might approach someone that you might see needs a little bit of help. And sometimes it's just that simple old saying is, a problem shared is a problem halved. And sometimes you've got to do it that way. And sometimes it doesn't actually change anything, but just venting a little bit Nigel's heard me say this before. When you turn the tap on, have that vent, have a real good vent, but then turn it off so it just doesn't drip constantly and put pressure on yourself or your family, because they're the people that would probably take it out on the most.
Yeah, that's a great response. Here's another question, and I know this comes up a lot in the farmers and growers that we deal with, Sam. How do you deal with the stresses of scenarios that are completely out of your control, but are really weighing heavily on you? What's your advice there? You know, like you might be on the field, on the rugby field, and the referee's pinging you for penalties, and you've got no control over that. What's your advice?
Yeah, hopefully it's not pinging me. Hopefully it's the team. But if it is me, I'll probably deserve it. But I think the biggest thing with understanding different scenarios, and as farmers or as beekeepers, as rural people, obviously the weather is one that always comes up. But we all know that it's never going to be a perfect summer, a perfect spring, perfect winter, and a perfect autumn. Like, we know that there's going to be different scenarios thrown at us. So it's actually preparing for some of those scenarios. And in rugby, we talk about it as what ifs, or you can call it nexts. And it's things that you know potentially might come up. Doesn't mean they will. So in a rugby terminology, being penalised 3 times in the last 5 minutes. What is our next step? What do we go to? What is our plan B? And sometimes you might need plan B, plan C, plan D, etc. But it's making sure that when you know, okay, this is not going the way we want, what is our ideal response and how do we want to do it? So, for example, we're giving away a whole lot of penalties for being offside. So we'll have a call to make sure we take an extra step on the defensive line. Really simple, but all it is making sure that we take that extra step so then we can be onside and take the referee out of it. I know sometimes this can be hard because some of the pressures and stresses and scenarios can be built up for a longer time period. Obviously, weather, drought, one that you guys are going through at the moment, prices of honey, trying to sell honey. But Robbie Deans used to always say this to his teams, is all things that are hard come to an end. Sometimes they take a long time to get there, but there always is a silver lining somewhere. And sometimes you just got to get to that silver lining to make sure that things do bounce back.
Okay, so you can, and what about controlling what you can control? What are the well-being things that you can do to look after yourself when you're going through a prolonged, difficult period?
Yeah, so I go back to the original one, is yourself. So hydration, and this is one that I know for myself is the first one to go out the window when the pressure comes on. But the first thing to become dehydrated is your brain. So making sure that you've got the right amount of water, you're drinking little and often, allows you to make better, more informed decisions, and hopefully going to take away some of those things that you don't want to go down, being injury, poor decision, which is going to create more work. And I know that sounds really simple, but sometimes the simple things are the things that are the most effective. So I think looking at that as an example, just something simple and easy to make sure that you are making the best decision with the best information that you've got at the time.
Okay, and here's what about when people are struggling and they may not be motivated to help themselves? I mean, what do you do to what can you do to relax them, de-stress them, and how important is it what can you do to help people who are not necessarily motivated to sort of move out of a bad space?
Yeah, it can be really hard when you are stuck in that little loop. It can be really challenging to drop that mood you're in and move forward. I find humour's a massive one, whether that's from people that you know, whether it's actually laughing at yourself, whether it's actually getting that humour from outside your current environment. There's heaps of ways of doing that, whether that's online, listening and going to see comedy shows, all those things. But one thing that definitely relaxes me and de-stresses me is actually planning in breaks and trying to do it with a little bit of foresight. So obviously with us as a rugby calendar, we kind of get what we're doing, where we're going. We can kind of break down the season into different blocks and chunks. So I've just had a 3-week chunk away from home. I knew that I was going to be home for these couple of days, so I've tried to really prioritize my wife and kids when I have been home. And as soon as you've got something to look forward to, it definitely makes it easier. I know it can be very challenging with beekeeping because winter's your downtime, you're feeding your hives, but spring is that time, right? It's all go. But sometimes it's just making sure when you get through the majority of that full-on time that you can have some time away and actually plan it with the people that you want to spend it with. And it's fine to plan it yourself, but I've found when you actually talk to someone, whether it's my wife or kids, and say, hey, what do you want to do when we get an opportunity? Is it go out for dinner? Is it go and do something fun? Is it clip and climb with the kids? Is it this? Is it that? And as soon as you actually talk about it, all of a sudden it takes you away from whatever is stressing you, and it's something to look forward to because it's something you're looking forward to, but also the people that you want to spend that time with.
And this leads naturally to our next question, which is you're away for a lot with your professional career. How do you maintain relationships during long periods away from your family and friends? Any advice there?
Yeah, it can be very challenging. So a bit of detail that rugby players deal with. We're away for roughly 120 to 150 days of the year, and sometimes that can be very challenging. Some days you're away for 2 nights and back. Some days you're away for 5 or 6 weeks in a row. What I found that works for myself is trying to check in every day, but not trying to do too much when you do check in. Just find out what's been happening, and can be quite challenging when the kids are misbehaving and causing some havoc at home. It's very hard trying to parent through the phone. So it's just laying out where you can help and how you can have an influence on those kids. And sometimes it's that, making sure you can talk to them around what their day's been like, what they've been up to, and actually just take some pressure off at home around that. But it can be very challenging when you are away from home, and also when you do step back into the home environment. Sometimes you're home for 4 days and then gone again, so you get back and disrupt the routine and the rhythm, and then all of a sudden leave again. So Hannah, my wife, does an outstanding job with the 3 kids. At times she is a single mum at home dealing with 3 of them. So she does love getting them to school and kindy and giving herself a chance to take a deep breath.
And here's another related question, I guess. When you work in a high pressure work environment, or like professional sport or running a business and stuff, it can be all consuming. How do you stop the stresses and pressures of that coming back into the family and affecting other family members?
Yeah, it can be all consuming. It can take a massive amount of work to not bring rugby home, not to blur those lines between family life and work life. One of the best things that I've been told, and it definitely helps me, and sometimes it's not as practical, but when I am at work, be at work, but when I'm at home, be at home. So when I about to drive up the drive, if I'm on the phone talking to someone about some rugby stuff, actually just stay at the end of the driveway or just around the corner, so the kids can't see me. I can deal with that conversation fully. But then when I do drive up the drive, leave my phone in the truck for the first 10 to 15 minutes and actually be home, be present. So the kids do see dad walk in the door. It does help, relationship with the kids. I get to check in with my wife, how the day's been, or how the last couple of hours has been. And it does give you that little bit of excitement that you see in the kids' face, rather than walking in, you're on the phone or you're dealing with something and you've just got to say, hey, wait 1 minute, because all of a sudden they will lose that excitement of having you walk in the door. And that is one of the most special times that you do get as a parent, as people on the call will totally understand.
Okay, and maybe we can head now into the sort of the headspace and the mental skills that you've picked up during your sporting career and stuff. How do you deal with a bad day at one of those games where nothing seems to be going right, everything seems to be going against you? Any tips there?
Yeah, I think the first thing to realise is no one's perfect. I I'm yet to meet the perfect person that's never made a mistake in their life. It's an opportunity to get better and learn and grow and evolve. And I know for watching people that I've played with and alongside, when they've gone through those days, myself included, when things aren't as we've always hoped. Sometimes you miss tackles, the opposition scores, sometimes you lose games, you drop the ball over the line. It's understanding that one moment or that one occasion doesn't define who you are. And the best thing that I find with that is actually just getting back on the horse straight away, rather than dwelling on it and overthinking it of, I missed this tackle, this is why, this is going to cost us. It's actually just worrying about the next one. It's working out, okay, what is the next thing I need to do? And sometimes it's a really simple thing, get off the ground. Sometimes it's point who I'm defending, or it might be just wrap when I tackle. And all of a sudden, the performing under pressure, the challenge of being better and evolving your game, all of a sudden it actually becomes easier, because all you've actually got to do is worry about the next task. And yeah, you don't want to be thinking about 20 things at a time. It's just, what is my next role right now? How can I do it to the best of my ability? And that's when I find myself, and when I see other people play their best games of rugby, is they're just worrying about what is their job right now, and how do they do it, and how do they perform doing that.
That's a good reply, and it leads naturally into the next question, which is about sort of the weight of expectation, if you like, and there's no better example of that than you this year, I suppose. The weight of the nation is a lot of eyes, a lot of expectation on a World Cup year. So what can you tell us about performing under that sort of pressure of expectation? How do you excel when all eyes are upon you, and how do you recognise it when you succeed? How can you tell when you're making a go of it?
Yeah, it's as a rugby player, there's a scoreboard, and most people look to that scoreboard straight away, and that will define how their game has been or their week been. So sometimes the scoreboard is actually the worst thing to give you that answer. Some days you can beat an opposition by 20 points, and everyone will look and go, oh, that's a great game. But the reality is that scoreboard is actually hiding a lot of other issues, and it's actually going back and reviewing your game, your week, and looking at it and going, all right, where was I successful? What actually set me up to be successful? Or did I kind of, throw the old hope out there and got across the line? So for myself, it's always good to go back and have a look at how I prepared through the week, how I prepared in the game, but then also how did I perform in the game? As I said, the scoreboard hides a lot of things, and sometimes winning is a lousy teacher. But making sure that you take time to go, okay, what did I do well? What can I be better at? And then all of a sudden, if you're addressing both of those things, your game or performance will be consistent. And then all of a sudden, you're going the way you want to. So you're starting to trend up, and hopefully your game is doing the same. And I know that's a rugby terminology, but you can actually apply that back into anything. So even though it's sport that I know, you can look at that, whether that's your relationships, whether that's your business, how you're communicating with people. You can actually just look at a lot of those things, and they definitely have a big outcome in what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, and here's the next question. Thanks for sending so many questions through. It's keeping it a lively session. And here's a very relevant topic. Change can test resilience, change and uncertainty, and that's something that a lot of people are facing at the moment in many sectors in agriculture and stuff. But how are you planning for a big life change when you hang up your boots? How do you live with change and uncertainty?
Yeah, I think when I do hang up the boots, it'll be a little bit different to hanging them up. I think I'll throw them in the bin and just keep on walking and know that it's done, because I think if you hang them up, you always be a little bit tempted to take them down and put them back on and get back out there. But You are right. It's been an amazing career that I've had so far. I started playing rugby with my brothers when I was 3. I played for high school old boys and the men on 2. Dad tells a whole lot of stories about holding me from my collar that I'm, trying to get out there, and eventually at halftime he'd have enough and let me go. And my brothers were the fast guys that would get across the line, get touched, then pass the ball, and I'd fall over and score. So I'd do that a little bit, and then apparently I'd jump in puddles and do cartwheels and chase butterflies as Dad tells those stories. But the challenge of being a rugby player, and especially a professional rugby player, is huge. The rate of depression, the rate of marriage splits, pressure of financials, all those things are really, really high in rugby players. And the average lifespan of rugby players is only 4 years. So the longer you play, the greater risk of those things become. And that's something that I'm aware of. Part of the Players Association, so we get all those numbers and facts and figures. We're doing a whole lot of things to try and mitigate and reduce those effects that it does have on rugby players, because rugby is almost around the wrong way. It's a short career and it can spike so quickly, but when it's over, it's gone. There's no up and over the hill. It's up and then drop, and that's something that been planning towards. We've got some land in the Hawke's Bay that we've had for a few years now, that we are going to go back to and live on and farm. So looking forward to that challenge of something different, kind of entering the farming world as a novice and having to relearn the ropes from things that we learned as younger kids, but looking forward to doing that as a family, because rugby at times can be quite a selfish sport, because it is hard to take your family with you, whether that's your wife away, your kids, and rugby rules my calendar. If rugby says I've got to be there, I've got to be there. So some days that means walking out the door and the kids are screaming. It'd be quite nice to just stay for an extra 10, 20 minutes, get them settled, then go. But it's just the way it is. You have to walk out the door and do that. So part of me is looking forward to hanging out the boots, but at the same time, part of me can't get enough of it and just loves that challenge of getting out there and mixing against some of the best players in the country and best players in the world.
Okay, so it's so how have you had such a long career? What are the good habits that you've done to look after yourself? How have you looked after yourself mentally and physically? And how do you make a habit stick? Because a lot of us have good intentions, but how do you make a habit stick?
Yeah, it's quite hard to make habits stick, but at the same time, as long as you are trying to put them in there and they're the right habits, they can be quite easy to get that change, and then obviously build the repetition through days, time, and obviously years. So for myself, I had a lot of trouble with my ankles, because I played a lot of basketball when I was younger. The height was one thing that definitely helped, but it was actually working out when I can do my rehab for my ankles and bit of prehab to make it most effective. And I tried a number of years of, I'll do it at lunchtime, I'll do it here, I'll do it in the gym. And I was so inconsistent. Some days I'd nail it, other days I wouldn't. And then someone said to me, have you heard of the concept about stacking habits? And I was like, no, I haven't heard. Can you give me a bit more? And I said, well, what do you do every day, regardless, no matter rain, hail, or shine? And I was trying to think, and I was like, oh, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They go, what else? I said, oh, I'll brush my teeth. And I said, there you go. Why don't you just stand on one foot? Do all your balancing exercises when you brush your teeth. So put one habit with another. And that's how I started, and all of a sudden got a better bang for my buck. I was doing 2 things at once. So even now, even though I've done it for the last 15 odd years, I still brush my teeth on one foot, because that accumulative effect of rehab, of getting my ankles stronger, has definitely helped. And I look at that and go, well, how am I going to do that in my farming career? There's heaps of different ways. So whether it's before you get on the bike, is it having a stretch? And we've talked about this, is a Farm Strong ambassador before, do you have a 30-second stretch to make sure you're stretching your lower back or your hip flexors? All of a sudden, every time you get onto the bike, you do that, then you're just building that time, that resilience to make sure you are a little bit healthier. Maybe you are working on that stiff back that does give you a bit of trouble. So when you do hit the busy time, which is the spring for a lot of people in the rural world, you're not bouncing back. You're actually thriving, not surviving.
Yeah, which takes us to one of the performance wonder drug, sleep. How do you manage your worry so you get a decent night's sleep, and how important is it to sleep? Because when people get busy, they often short sleep, don't they? It's the first thing that goes out the window if they're very worried.
Yes, sleep is one of those things that you can forget about pretty quickly, and when you need time, you just eat into your sleep. I do it. I know a lot of people do it, but it's making sure you get the right amount of sleep, and it's really good quality sleep. So a couple of things that I've learnt that definitely helped me. So when I am under the pump, my sleep naturally is not that good. But what I've learned is actually having a pen and a piece of paper either next to my bed or somewhere that I can just write things down. So if I need to do 3 things in the morning, I need to pack my bag, get my boots, whatever it is with the family or the farm, I'll just write it down. And as soon as it's written down, it probably just reminds me to just stop, slow down, and actually put those things in order. What is actually important and what is a must do versus would be nice to have done. And when I do that, then all of a sudden it gives me an order of things to tick off, and it gives me a list to go through, and that normally gives me some pretty good sleep. If I don't do that, I normally toss and turn and have a pretty terrible sleep, and then that affects my next day, and then obviously it's a snowball effect from there.
And when you're really busy, of course, it's very hard for people to get away from their businesses, isn't it? It's, you might have a break plan, but what are the little steps that you can take during an extremely busy period and stuff during the day to keep yourself well and to sort of reset, if you like?
Yeah, it's something that I actually watched Dad do when I was younger, and at the time I didn't really know what he was up to. But being a dairy farmer, he'd be up early, we'd be at school or whatever it was, and after lunch he'd just take, and I don't know how he used to do it. He did it somehow really well. He'd honestly take 30 seconds to 2 minutes. He'd sit down on the chair, close his eyes for that amount of time, and just take that minute or two and stop. He was thinking about whatever he was thinking about, and it was actually a chance for him just to clear his head. And then before he was actually all the way asleep, he'd get up and then he'd be off again, and just use that little moment to re-energize himself. And that's something that I do too. And it's amazing, in the All Black calendar, we actually have sleep nap, power nap windows put into our whole day. So there's that normal natural drop after you eat at lunchtime, that your body kind of hits on the way down after a good right amount of food, and it's just taking that 2 to 3 minutes of stop, reassess the day, go over whatever you need to, and actually it gives you more energy. So then in the afternoon you can really spike with your energy, put that energy where it needs to be, and then go from there. So I remember when the doctors and stuff were saying, hey, look, we've got this amazing new drug, it's going to make everyone world beaters. And we're all thinking, this sounds real dodgy. And they came out and said, hey, it's sleep. It's something that, when people have a massive car accident, they're put into a coma because sleep is the best form of recovery.
Well, that's nicely put there. Yeah, you're right. It's an absolute foundation, isn't it, for wellness. Now, here's something that we'd all identify with. What if you're working in a job or a team situation and stuff, and you're feeling frustrated? You air those frustrations, and they don't seem to be going anywhere. How do you stop those frustrations whirring around in your head and that sort of self-talk and negativity? How do you get out of that negative spiral, if you like?
Yeah, that negative spiral is real. We all get there. We all go there. It's okay to go there, but it's how quickly you can get out of that negative spiral and actually work out a way to have an improvement. So for myself, I have a mental reset. If something's not going the way I'd like, is actually stopping, wiggling my toes in my boot, which gets me out of that mental loop, and then allows me to actually think of what is the next job, what is the next role. But as in the question says, you keep getting frustrated more and more and more. So, I'd go back to who you're speaking up to. Is it speaking to someone that can actually do something about it? So a phrase that we have at the Crusaders, whinge up. So don't whinge down. If you're whinging up, whinge to someone that can fix it. If they can't fix it, go to someone higher. And then that all of a sudden gives you an opportunity to sort out some of those frustrations. And the other part of it is, don't go to them with the problem, go to them with the solution. Because it's really easy for people to okay the solution, but if you go to them with a problem, they 9 times out of 10 say, hey, look, I've got to do my own job, you worry about that. But if you go to them with a solution, they'll just say, cool, yep, agree with it, let's get on with it. And that can be a really good way to help not only yourself but the team, and that's where it all comes down to, especially in rugby. And when I say team in the beekeeping world, I'm meaning it could be your family, it could be someone else that you're working with. If you are more efficient, all of a sudden it's going to be a lot easier to do your job and allow other people to do theirs.
And what other mental skills have you picked up in your rugby career and stuff? And what difference do they make? I mean, when I was watching the test on Saturday night, you seem to have two very physically equal teams and stuff. What is the difference? How important are mental skills in sport?
Yeah, that's a great eye you've got. You would have seen that we're all roughly the same height, roughly the same size, strength, fitness, skill level. So where the big game is kind of happening now, the big area of growth, and it has been this way for the last 10 or so years, is the mental space. Is how well can you adapt and think under pressure? How well can you get that information to make sure you can use that in the right way? And it's different for every person. So for someone like myself in the line-out, I've got to see certain pitches, but Richie Mwanga, as our first 5, he has to see different pitches from there. But yet again, with the communication style, the information that's coming in, he doesn't need what the problems are. He needs the solution. He needs the action of, hey, I need this and this is how I want you to do it. So he needs someone to say, hey, kick back left corner, not, hey, there's someone flying at you, watch out, he's going to get you. All of a sudden that's too slow and it's not going to work. So sometimes it's actually clear, direct as an order communication. So that's on field, but then obviously the preparation that goes into it off field around working out what teams are going to try to do to us, what we try to do to ourselves, where the weaknesses, and how do we nullify them.
And in terms of mental fitness, maybe you mentioning in an earlier webinar, visualization and breathing techniques and stuff. How helpful are those, and how describe how they work?
Yeah, so breathing is one that's definitely come in over the last 5 or 6 years. And when you hear breathing, everyone's like, well, I'm breathing right now and I feel fine. And that's what I thought it was as well. But there's a whole lot of different ways of how you're breathing and why you're breathing. So it's hand on your tummy. Are you breathing, shallow breaths through your tummy? Are you lifting your diaphragm? There's a whole lot of science that goes behind it. I won't bore everyone with it here, but the way you breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, etc., can be really challenging how you're doing that. So there's a whole lot of things and different ways of doing it. I know for myself, having a long exhale definitely allows me to let go of whatever's just happened if I've made a mistake. And then that allows me to go back to my processes, as I said before, around what is my next job. But there's heaps of things that you can do yourself to help you, especially if you're working by yourself, if you're isolated, as beekeepers can be, to make sure that you go to when you're feeling the pressure. And sometimes it's actually that too. Make sure you do it when you're not feeling the pressure. So you're actually banking a whole lot of good stuff. So when the pressure does come on, you're not in negative reserve straight away. You're actually in a good spot to be resilient and bounce back pretty quickly from what's just happened.
Yeah, because and as you say, as you've seen on the chat there, it can be a very isolating job, beekeeping. You're working on your own and stuff. How do you, yeah, what's your advice there about dealing with that isolation and stuff, and making the effort to connect with others, and also to sort of, I suppose, combat that sort of self-talk that's often can be very negative?
Yeah, it's something that I don't have to deal with. So the isolation is something that is new to me. But the way I would look at that and say is, well, how do you make sure that you don't feel isolated? So everyone's got one of these somewhere. There are ways to connect with other people, and this is when I feel a little bit isolated, make sure that I take time to connect with people I might not have seen or talked to for a while. So for me, it's obviously wife and kids are number one, but then obviously family is a big thing for us. So making sure that I'm efficient with my time. So if I'm driving between jobs, if I'm on the team bus between trainings or gyms or games or whatever it is, taking that time to connect with a few different people and make sure that I am staying in touch with not only myself and what I've been up to, but what I've been up to. I always find that I get more energy out of conversations when I ask people what they've been up to, rather than telling them what I've been up to. And I know with that, all of a sudden people are more interested in their own lives and what they've been up to, and that gives me the bounce. That gives me an opportunity, A, to catch up, but B, allows me to understand what they've been going through and some of the challenges they've been facing.
It's great, yeah. So it's important to. What if someone has sort of dropped off the radar and stuff? And how much of an effort do you need to go to, and to, how much should you persevere to get in touch with them?
Yeah, sometimes it's all about timing. Obviously, ringing people that are busy in the morning, sometimes they won't answer, but sometimes it's the best time to get a hold of people. Like my little brother's playing in France at the moment, so I know that if I want to get him, I've got to be up early or into bed late. But it's quite nice when you book in a time and say, hey, look, I'm going to give you a ring tomorrow morning your time, because you've made that appointment, and it's just a social catch up. So it's nice to be able to lock it in. You both know, and you make time for that to happen. That's definitely one tip I've found helps me keep connected with who I need to, and it definitely helps me in my mental space, and also my physical space. Because if mentally I'm in a good spot, all of a sudden I feel good, want to go out and train really hard, and it keeps me pretty level-headed and really grounded with what I'm trying to achieve.
It sounds like you're a particularly good listener and an active listener. So what does it take to be a good listener? Because that's a lot of people aren't such good listeners, but they're great at talking at others, aren't they?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a great listener. I'd say that's one of my things I'm working on. And it sounds really funny. Sometimes you've got to ask a question and just start counting in your head. And for myself, I know if I get to about 10 seconds in my head and someone hasn't said something, I'm actually in a really good spot, especially when trying to help someone. If I've identified they might be struggling, whether it be on field, off field, all those things. So sometimes it's just being able to stop and listen and wait, and it can be really hard. And for myself, especially 3 or 4 years ago, I would have asked a question. I probably would have answered it before I gave the person an opportunity to say what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and then we can make a good plan from there.
And we've heard about some challenging times for a lot of the beekeepers who might be tuned into this and catching up with it later. So how do you get through a very challenging time? How do you sort of sustain yourself for the long haul? It could be it could be another year or so before there's an upturn. How do you get through a period like that of challenge?
Yeah, that's something that everyone faces at some stage through their life. And, I'm still pretty young in the terms of worldly things, but it's actually just making sure that you don't let that one thing define you. I know when a challenge happened that we didn't win the Rugby World Cup in 19, So many people said to us, "Hey, not going to get another opportunity for some guys. Some guys had to wait another 4 years." But the one thing that definitely made it easier to accept what had happened was understanding that, hey, look, rugby doesn't define me. I still am a whole lot of other things. I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a husband. I've got all these other things going on in my life. Yes, rugby is a massive part of my life, but the reality is that loss ever going to go away? No, it won't. Will I learn to deal with it potentially at some stage? But it just put things into a different light, into a different perspective of, hey, I'm still healthy. I've still got all my fingers, all my toes. I got an awesome family, an awesome support network around me. So that definitely made some of those challenging times a little bit more bearable. Does it mean I'd love to go back and change the outcome? Yeah, 100% I would. But it just means now that I've got to understand that that's not just the way it's going to define me as a person or as a rugby player, but we've got an awesome opportunity, the team does, and not so many weeks away to go out there and hopefully play better than we did in 2019.
Yes. Well, best of luck with that. And so let's head back to where we started with proactively investing in your well-being and stuff. And we often get focused on the big picture, don't we, and the big prize and stuff. And we forget to enjoy the simple pleasures of life along the way. Tell us about the importance of celebrating the small wins as well as the great big prizes.
Yeah, that's one of those ones as a rugby player we do lose track of pretty quickly. But I think when we do set goals and you do achieve them, and sometimes it's a simple goal of, hey, I want to reach this marker on a fitness test or this in a strength test, and numbers are really easy to set goals on because it's really easy to get that feedback. So, I want to lift 100 kgs, work up to it, bang, you hit that mark. But make sure you actually celebrate it. So the first thing you go, okay, I hit 100, shouldn't be, I want to be 101 now. It's actually stop, enjoy the work ethic that it's taken to get there. And then, pretty quickly after a year, you can reset the goal, but it's actually stop and enjoying what you've achieved. And sometimes it can be really hard to do that when it is doom and gloom. But sometimes it's actually just celebrating those little things, because all of a sudden, if you win a whole lot of little moments, that turns out to be a pretty big moment in the scheme of things.
Yeah, that's a nice way to finish up. And I'd like to add that last year, 17,000 farmers and growers did something that improves their well-being and ability to cope with the ups and downs of their lives, thanks to FarmStrong. So if you've got, if you're going through some tough times, there's a lot of FarmStrong resources that are freely available through the FarmStrong website. There's a book here of farmers and growers, Live Well, Farm Well, that shares the story of 29 farmers and growers who've been through some very, very rough times indeed, and share what got them through. And there's a ton of tips and videos and all sorts of insights into mental skills and healthy thinking strategies that you can use when you're under stress and pressure that really have made a difference to farmers and growers' lives, and of course the lives of their family and their businesses. So I urge you to delve further. And we thanks very much tonight to APNZ for the opportunity to host Samuel Whitelock, our ambassador, and to involve FarmStrong in the journey forward. We wish you all the best. I hope things really improve in the sector and stuff. I'm sure they will. And so good night from us, and thanks very much for taking part in this webinar. If you know someone else who'd benefit from having a look at it, we'll make the link available soon.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Nigel and Chrissy, for having us on. I know it's a challenging time. I'm kind of got my eye half on the football there. I see we're up 1-0, which is outstanding. Can't wait to watch the rest of that. But thanks everyone for listening, and keep up the good work, everyone. I know these hard times will come to an end at some stage.
Thanks, Sam. See you later.